Welcome to the 2011 NFL season preview. I'm your host, Marco D'Angelo, and we're going to take a look at what to expect in this upcoming NFL season. If you're like most sports fans, the past few days have been just sheer chaos in the NFL. We're taping this video on July 29th. The NFL lockout ended on Monday, and the teams have been scrambling to sign free agents and their draft picks. Teams are getting new players, changing rosters, new coaching staffs. What does all this mean to the sports bettor? Well, I'm going to try to break that down for you and give you some insights on how you can be prepared for the NFL season and what to look for, because this is something we've never had before. I've been doing this for 32 years, and I've never entered an NFL football season with as much uncertainty as we have entering this season. Players are going to camp literally and going to be playing a game within a week. It's going to be something we've never experienced, and I've got some thoughts on which teams will excel. Now, obviously, because teams were locked out, the players were locked out, they weren't able to have mini camps in the spring like they normally have, or the optional practices that a lot of the younger players or new players coming to a team will obviously attend so that they can get the playbook down. This is a situation that's going to hurt teams in certain situations. What are those situations? Well, first and foremost, teams that have new coaching staffs, I think, are going to be behind the eight ball to start this season. They've had no interaction with their players, and if they're going to instill new playbooks, the players are going to have to try to learn these plays at a very short time, which means what's going to happen for a lot of these teams is they're not going to be able to use their entire playbook right off the start. There's 8 teams with new coaches this year. Carolina has Ron Rivera. Cleveland has Pat Shurmur. Denver has John Fox. Oakland has Hugh Jackson. San Francisco has Jim Harbaugh. Tennessee has Mike Munchak. Those 6 teams, brand new coaches. Now, John Fox for Denver has been a coach that's been around the NFL, last at Carolina, so he has experience. But these other guys, this is their first head coaching job in the NFL. The other 2 coaches are Dallas's Jason Garrett and Minnesota's Leslie Frazier. Now, these 2 guys are new head coaches, but at least they had the advantage of coaching last year as interim coaches. Jason Garrett led the Cowboys over the last 8 games of the season, and obviously the Cowboys played much better the second half of the season as they did the first half for Wade Phillips. This was a team that last year was expected to go to the playoffs. Many thought they would win the Super Bowl last year, and they totally underachieved under Phillips. Minnesota, obviously, Leslie Frazier took over the final 6 games. Minnesota was in total chaos last year with the Brett Favre situation and everything else going on there. That team was just, it needed to make a change, and they did with their coaching staff. But not only this year does Minnesota have a new coach, they've got a new quarterback. Brett Favre is retired again. So they needed to go out and get a quarterback. They signed a quarterback this week, Donovan McNabb, from the Washington Redskins. Now, a lot of people feel that McNabb is done, that last year was a bust in Washington. McNabb and Shanahan just didn't mix. That was a situation last year that as the season unfolded, those 2 just didn't gel well, and they weren't on the same page. Lot of, intensity between the 2. Friction. I think this is a good move for both teams. Minnesota has a good defense. Minnesota has one of the best running backs in football. This will be something that will help them. We saw what happened to Minnesota 2 years ago when they brought Brett Favre in. That was the one missing piece they needed. They needed stability at the quarterback position, something they hadn't had. I think if Donovan McNabb just has an average season, doesn't, just drives the bus, doesn't get into any train wrecks, Minnesota will be okay. They're going to be an undervalued team because of the new coach and because of Donovan McNabb. But I do think there's value with this team. But let's talk about some other teams that are really, I feel, going to struggle. We're going to talk about a couple win totals on 2 teams in the NFL. But my premise is the teams that have new coaches this year, it's going to be a catch-up process. because the players have to adapt to the new coaches. They have to adapt to the new playbooks and the offensive or defensive schemes. And with a short period to prepare, teams are going to be forced in these preseason games to play starters more than they normally would. I know that's something that just doesn't happen in preseason football, but it's got to happen this year to get the starters ready, to get them ready for the season. So as far as preseason football goes, I think you're going to find several instances where there's going to be major mismatches just because of the dynamics of the game. The better teams getting ready have to get their reps in, and their first unit is so far above the other team's first unit that it'll make for a lopsided score. I think this is something that you're going to have to look at. Watch your local newspapers, and then you can always pick up all of this kind of information on the internet about player rotations, how long coaches are planning on going with certain players. This is important at this time of the season, but more so this year because the talent gap with these teams is going to be immense from the teams that have as opposed to the teams that have not. Also, I think once the regular season starts, teams that have continuity are going to be the teams to play on early. What do I mean by that? Well, teams that have the coaching staff in place and have been there for several times. The good organizations, the teams that their nucleus has not changed. The team was pretty well set, so you've got the same players, the same offensive playbook, the same defensive playbook. Those teams are going to get off to a quicker start because they won't need as much practice to catch up to the teams that are infusing new players and new coaches. This is going to get a lot of teams off to quick starts on the season, which will help them, in the race to the playoffs. Now, what does that mean for us betting win totals? Well, I think there's a few teams that this applies to. One of the teams that I think is going to be at a major, major disadvantage this year is the Oakland Raiders. And this is actually my best NFL season win total of all of them. I'm going to advise you guys to take the Oakland Raiders under 7 wins for the season. Why am I doing this? Simply put, the Oakland Raiders, they were an 8-8 team last year. They came out of nowhere to get to that 8-8 record. The fact that they're 8-8, they're going to get a little bit of a tougher schedule this season. That's normal. The better you finish last year, the tougher the schedule you get the next year. So a natural regression from a mediocre team is not that far off to be expected. What makes this so sweet is the fact that after an 8-8 season, 6-0 in the division, they turn around and fire the coach. Why? Why would you let the coach go? Well, when I talk about continuity and I talk about organization, you don't find the Oakland Raiders or the name Al Davis in the dictionary anywhere near those two words. They don't do things organized or things that make sense. This is going to be total chaos in Oakland. New coaching staff, the late start to the season, a tougher schedule. I see no way the Oakland Raiders move forward. Plus they lose their best defensive back. This is a situation where this team has to regress. And to go from 8 wins to 7 is not a stretch. I'm going to take them under 7 runs for my best bet for preseason football to give out in the preseason on the win total. Another team that I think is a great situation is the San Diego Chargers. The San Diego Chargers have their coaching staff in place. They have their all-pro quarterback in Phillip Rivers, who's put up monster numbers the last several years. This team has the nucleus back. They play in a division that I think they're going to own. Let's look at who they have to battle. I already talked about the Oakland Raiders, how I expect them to go backwards. The Denver Broncos, they're another team that's going to struggle at the beginning of the season. They've got a new coach. It's a veteran coach, but it's a new coach. There's going to be new game plans, new playbooks. The team's going to have to catch up to John Fox. Also, which we're taping on Friday, there's still a quarterback situation in Denver. We don't know what they're going to do. There's a lot of rumors that they're going to trade Kyle Orton. Is it Tim Tebow going to be the quarterback? What kind of learning curve is he going to have as a starter? I just don't see the Denver Broncos as winning a lot of games. And then the final team is the Kansas City Chiefs. The Kansas City Chiefs last year showed that they were a team on the rise. But when it got late in the season and it got to playoff time, we saw that the Kansas City defense wasn't ready to rise to the occasion. Baltimore blew them out in the playoffs. We also saw that Cassell, although he put up great numbers during the season, wasn't able to deliver in that big playoff game as the man. And that's got to be a concern. I expect a regression on Kansas City this year as well. So with all of those factors in the AFC West, I don't see how the San Diego Chargers can't win 10 games. The over-under on their season total is 10 wins. I like the San Diego Chargers to go over 10 wins. Those are my two bets for the win totals. We'll have some more as we start looking at where all of the free agents finally land, as there's still a little bit of maneuvering to go on. I want to talk about some teams that have made some moves and what that's going to mean. Some of the big names that have moved into free agency, obviously, is Cobb has gone to Arizona. This is, in the long run, going to help Arizona. Now, I realize he's a quarterback that really hasn't proven anything yet. You're signing him on potential. He's had some games, he's had some big games, but he hasn't been the man yet. He's always been behind somebody. He was behind Donovan McNabb at Philadelphia for his entire career. Last year, he finally got his shot when they traded McNabb, and he couldn't hold off Michael Vick for the starting job. He got the job to start the season, got hurt, and never got it back. We'll see what he does in Arizona. I expect him to put up some huge numbers with those receivers in Arizona, but we'll see if he can carry that team. I think the team's going to struggle early in the season because, again, here's a guy that's going to a new team and a new playbook that wasn't able to participate in spring practices or the optional practices, or at least to have his hands on the playbook during the off season. So he's going to have to catch up. This is a team that may be a go against early in the season where there's going to be value going against them. But later in the season, as the team gets better, the line will take a while to catch up because people will look at the slow start that I expect Arizona to have. Another team that's going to struggle early on, Tennessee. New coach, Mike Munchak takes over. First time as a head coach in the NFL. New quarterback. Matt Hasselbeck moves from Seattle to Tennessee. I think he's a good fit in Tennessee, but just like Kolb in Arizona, it's going to take time. He's going to have to learn the playbook. They're going to have to run a vanilla offense a little bit at the beginning to let him catch up to speed. At least an advantage he has that Kolb doesn't have in Arizona is he's got a good running game. He's got a good running back behind him in Tennessee, so that's going to help take some of the pressure off. We already talked about McNabb going to Minnesota. I think that's going to help the Vikings as well. Teams that I expect to do well early on, that the nucleus is in place, obviously the New England Patriots. Here's a team, when you talk about organization and you look it up in the dictionary, you're going to find the Patriots and you're going to find Bill Belichick. This guy does things methodically. This team won't miss a beat. They've got the basis of their team there, so it's just going to be getting this team tight and ready to start the season. I think they'll get off to a quick start, and they're a team to look to play on in the early going. Also, organizations like the Pittsburgh Steelers, generally, this is a sound, organized franchise. Now, they've made a lot of moves in this week, cutting players, and it wasn't signing free agents. It was actually getting rid of some higher priced players because the Steelers need to do some maneuvering with the salary cap. But when you look at the team as a whole, this is a team that has its nucleus there. The coaching staff has been in place for several years, and it's a very well-run organization. These are the kind of teams that are going to excel early on in the season because they won't have as far to catch up as the other teams will. Those are the advantages and the suggestions that I have leading on to the start of the football season. As we get closer to the actual start of the season and throughout preseason, we'll be back with weekly updates and picks on some preseason games. And of course, once we get into the regular season, I'll be here every week breaking down NFL and college football. I know I'm excited about it. I hope you guys are too. I hope you enjoyed the show. We'll be back next week. We'll look at some more football action and see all of the final free agent signings and talk about who the winners and the losers are during this free agent signing period. Until then, best of luck with all of your wagers. I'm Marco D'Angelo. Good luck. Thanks for watching.